London, and we want to explore why so many folks, the Alzheimer's Association says, although most people want to know if they have Alzheimer's disease, only 4 out of 10 actually bring it up with their doctor. You might be one of them going, I wish I knew. Is there any test? What should I be doing? So I am speaking right now with Dr. Amy Sanders. She's a neurologist and director of the Hartford Healthcare Memory Care Center about the questions we really need to ask the doctor so we can find out earlier. Welcome, doctor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, first of all, early detection is important, right? I mean, I think there's also the people who might not want to know, but is there an advantage to finding out early?
Not only is there an advantage, there are multiple advantages to finding out early. First of all, knowledge is power. So if you know that something is going on, it's usually easier to deal with it if you know about it than persisting in fear of the unknown. The answers may actually turn out to, in the end, to be not those that you want to hear, but you can't deal with them unless you know about them. And many times the answers are not as bad as you fear they might be. And that can be reassuring. And then also establishes a connection where you can keep track of these things, have them monitored over time. It's not going to take a lot of time out of your life, but the monitoring is important.
So again, the Alzheimer's Association says, although a lot of people do want to know, only 4 out of 10 bring it up at their doctors. So should we be asking? And can you explain this more?
Absolutely. So many people don't want to ask, partly because they fear the answer, partly because they don't actually think that there's a problem. Many times it's a care partner, a spouse, a child, sometimes even a parent. Who comes with the patient aware of the problem, and the patient says, oh, no, everything's just fine. We see that a lot. But so denial, fear, sometimes people just think, well, it's normal for aging. No, it isn't.
Okay.
We used to think it was normal for aging. If we were having this conversation 40 years ago, I probably might have reassured people that, yes, it is normal for aging, but we now know better. There are things that are part of the normal aging process that happen to cognition. Memory dysfunction, memory decline, never one of them.
Really?
So
never? Wait, let me just stop you right there. Memory. It's never normal to lose your memory. Like even like little things like, I don't remember the name of the store that I went to a few days ago, or things like that, or I don't remember where I put my keys. Like, I guess, people will say, oh, senior moments. So that's not really a real thing.
So a senior moment is a quasi-real thing. Many times I put my keys in the wrong place is not a problem of memory. That's a problem of paying attention.
Okay.
And one of the things that happens to the aging brain, and the brain does age just the same way that the hair does and the skin does, and oh my God, my knees. So the brain does age. And when we're young, we pay attention, it seems, effortlessly, but not so much. As we get older, we realize that in fact, the ability to do that seemingly effortlessly was wonderful, but now it's not effortless anymore. Conscious, focused effort you need in order to pay attention to what you're doing. So if you have a tendency to lose your keys, or in my case, it was always sunglasses, then you have to come up with an adaptive strategy. When you put your keys down, say to yourself, I am putting my keys down. I'm not putting them in the bowl in the kitchen where they belong. They're going to be on this table in the den instead, and I have to remember that. Try that. See if it works.
Okay.
I bet most of the time it will. If, though, you're coming home from the supermarket and you put the groceries away and somehow the ice cream winds up in the dishwasher instead of the freezer, that could indicate that there may actually be a problem brewing.
Okay.
And then it's worth having the conversation with your doctor. And there are many strategies on how to do that successfully.
So how do we prepare for that appointment? And I guess you hit the nail on the head where you say some people don't even notice. So if, say, it's my mom and I'm noticing things, but she's not really, then do we need to go to the doctor together? Or how do we prepare for this?
So I'm going to answer your second question first. In my opinion, everybody always, regardless of age, should go to their doctor's appointment with a second set of ears in the room.
Hmm.
Appointments have gotten so short, and the amount of information that needs to be exchanged, questions and answers, has gotten so enormous that it's practically impossible for anybody to manage their own medical care on their own anymore. I had a medical test a few years ago. I'm a physician, so when the supervising physician came in and mumbled a few things under his breath, I knew what he was talking about. But if I hadn't been a physician, I would have been clueless. I wouldn't even have known probably who he was. So, manners perhaps in medicine these days are, let's just say that there's an opportunity for improvement there. So, your doctor is probably really, really busy and is very, very pressed for time. So, you want to maximize the time. You want to be specific. And when I say be specific, I mean be as specific as humanly possible.
Mm.
Write down the memory lapses that you have experienced and how they have impacted your life. Not all physicians know that memory loss is never a part of the normal aging process. So it's important to underscore for your clinician the fact that you are actually having memory struggles, specific kinds of memory struggles, and how they are having an impact on your life. Are they causing you to have trouble at work? Are they causing you to have trouble in your relationships? Are they just making you afraid of what might be to come? All of those things constitute diverse forms of impacts on a life that memory dysfunction could have. So be specific, come with examples, ask questions, bring a second set of ears.
Okay. And the reason you want us to do that is you just mentioned we don't get a lot of time with the doctor nowadays, and their focus, especially if it's just a well visit, more on the basics. But it might trigger a referral to a specialist where you would get a more extensive workup. So you say we need to be bold. If we get that referral, what happens then? I mean, how do they tell if it's something where we have cognition issues we need to worry about?
In a clinic like ours, so we are essentially a dementia clinic, although we don't call ourselves that for obvious reasons, a lot of bad associations with that word. We do have the luxury of time to get the necessary background history. We need to learn a lot about a person and not necessarily things that are so commonplace as part of the typical history that might be gathered in a primary care office. For example, we're going to ask you about your job. We might ask you about your hobbies. We might ask you, or we will ask you, about how far you went in school. Do you speak any languages other than English? What sort of cognitively stimulating activities do you engage in? You don't have to recognize them as such, but that's helpful for us. An extensive history about your family, about safety, potential safety issues. So the first visit with me usually takes at least 90 minutes.
Okay. So you're going
90
to really
minutes.
go
That's
through it.
very different than a 15-minute appointment with your primary care practice.
Yes. And that's why you
We
want
do
that second
generally
set.
speaking, yes, we do generally speaking also some cognitive screening. So that's often done sometimes in a primary care office as well, although in that office it generally might require a separate appointment to do a screening test. A famous one these days that is used is called the MOCA, which is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. That one is given very frequently, but it takes about 15 minutes to administer. So if you only have a 15-minute appointment, you can see the problem there. So we do cognitive screening. If we think that we may have found a problem either through the screening or through the history that we have heard, and also people come always with a care partner, because sometimes the care partner is going to have noticed things that the person who's coming to the appointment is not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
None of us are our own best describers. So it's always important to have a second source of information.
Yeah.
And then if we think that there might be a problem, we launch a workup. So that can include some blood work, that can include some brain imaging. It can include referral for much, much more detailed cognitive testing, which is usually done with a kind of practitioner known as a neuropsychologist who administers thinking tests for a living.
Okay. Okay. So
So
again,
there's a lot of investigating that we can do.
yeah, and a lot more that you might not even be aware of that's not going to happen in your primary care. So back to that original question of some are going to say, well, why is it so important to get diagnosed early with Alzheimer's or any other form of dementia? I heard there's no cure. So why is it important?
Well, if you think about cure, most diseases that take people to their doctor's offices are also not curable. Diabetes is not curable, high blood pressure is not curable, heart disease is not curable, cancer is treatable, HIV is now treatable. So many things that once upon a time were considered incurable are now managed on a chronic basis. The medications that we have for treating any of the dementing diseases are not so great. They are getting better,
Mm.
and once that the we reach success with being able really to be able to prescribe disease modifying medications for Alzheimer's disease, which may happen as early as later this year.
Hmm.
I think that's going to change people's perspectives.
Yeah.
But the focus just on medication and cure is far too narrow. There is much that we can do to help a person live their best quality life with a dementing disease. And a lot of that involves education of the person with the dementing disease, as well as their family and their circle of loved ones. Once again, knowledge is truly power here. Nobody is born as a caregiver, as a natural care partner. I firmly believe this. I've been in practice for almost 15 years and I've never met one. So I might someday, but I haven't yet.
Okay.
That's the bad news. The good news is the skills can be taught. So we can teach you, no, 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 don't do that. Try this instead.
Yeah.
And you would be amazed at what a difference some of those simple pointers can make about whether today is a bad day or a good day.
I imagine a lot of the people watching this show might be like me, part of the sandwich generation. I'm taking care of my kids, taking care of my mom, trying to determine, was it okay that she just didn't say CVS and she called it a completely different drugstore from her childhood, or maybe no big deal, or other things. But since we are the ones who might have to encourage our loved ones, what should we report? Where should we say, hey, I really want to take this down the road, like I'm concerned? What are the signs we should be concerned about?
So deviation from what is normal. So a senior moment might not be such a big deal. There's something called the tip of the tongue phenomenon where you just can't find that word, but it comes back to you later. If more often than not, a word comes back to you later, that's probably okay. If it never comes back to you, that's a warning sign. Getting lost, going to places that should be familiar.
Mm.
I'm not talking about, driving in a state that you haven't lived in for 20 years, or I'm talking about, going to your hairdresser, going to your supermarket. I've been going to the same primary care physician for over 3 years, and I need the GPS every single time I go there. That's just too twisty, turny. I have a terrible sense of direction. That's not at all new for me. Doesn't worry me in the least.
Yeah,
I mean,
me
it's kind
too.
of embarrassing to have a sense of direction that's that bad, um, but things that deviate from normal. And you can tell sometimes in conversation, if conversation gets vague, if people repeat themselves, if they tell the same story over and over again, if they ask questions repetitively, and everybody repeats themselves occasionally. I'm talking about the same question over and over again in 10-minute time increments.
Yeah.
That's an indication that some rapid forgetting might be going on.
Dr. Tenders, we appreciate so much your time, and you're at the Hartford Healthcare Memory Center. I want to let people know, if they're listening in Connecticut, this is a great resource, but definitely advocate. And as you said, be bold and come prepared for that next appointment, especially with these new drugs coming down the pipeline. I'm going to be switching over to Kristen Casado, who runs the communications for the Alzheimer's Association of Connecticut. I know she's got a lot of other statistics and tips that we're going to be talking about, but I want to thank you for your time. And you've armed us with some good information for us who are caregivers and those who maybe just are listening, and what we need to do at that next doctor's appointment. Hopefully we're making those doctor's appointments. So we appreciate you being here.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So this is it's a really big issue because there are 11 million caregivers in the United States, about 130,000 in Connecticut, giving more than 200 hours of unpaid care. Many of them, a quarter of them, are sandwich generation who are raising their own kids and taking care of their parents. So the caregiver burden is real. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this show right now is we want to make sure everybody, especially the caregivers, has the most information. So I'm joined now by Kristen Cusado. She is Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Association of Connecticut. She actually used to be one of us. She's a recovering news anchor, reporter, but devoted her life to noble causes after your mom experienced Alzheimer's.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, my mom was diagnosed in 2009 with a type of dementia called Lewy body dementia at the age of 61. And when you're diagnosed below the age of 65, it's called younger onset. So she lived with that for about 4 years, and I was with her on the journey. And I always say that she continued to take care of me by providing me a new career and a new purpose. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. And I think, this is, many people are scared, right? They don't want to hear about Alzheimer's. We just heard why we should want to actually get a diagnosis. And can we just start with the basics? People will interchange Alzheimer's and dementia. What
Sure.
is the difference?
Yeah, it's a very common question. So many people ask that. And dementia is the actual umbrella term of symptoms that one experiences. So dementia is the getting lost or the getting confused or the not realizing the order of something that a sock goes on before a shoe, right? It's kind of the things that you experience. Alzheimer's and Lewy body and vascular, those different types, those are the biological changes in your brain which lead to those symptoms, which lead to dementia. So if you have been diagnosed with dementia, kind of which type have you been diagnosed with? Because they all present a little bit differently.
Yeah, and so you want us to understand the statistics because it is so common. Again, the caregiver burden in Connecticut is real, right? 64% have a chronic condition, and 28% are reporting depression or poor physical health with the caregivers. It doesn't always have to be that way. I want to let people know that the Alzheimer's Association has all these resources that sometimes you're just probably not realizing they're there, or maybe you think you're too busy to reach out. But we want to help the caregivers both help their loved ones get diagnosed, but also help themselves.
I think that's really important, Kara, because I think that caregivers don't realize that they don't have to do this by themselves. They always think, oh, you know what? I'm going to take care of it. Either mom or dad going to be in the house. We're just going to take care of it. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to go to the doctor's office myself.
Right.
I'm not going to take care of myself because it's not my number one priority. But you really need to make it a priority because it's the whole take your oxygen first. You need to be a good caregiver in good shape to be able to take care of your loved one who's suffering. And those statistics that you just talked about the caregiver burden, that's really important. And that just came out in our 2023 Alzheimer's Association facts and figures. And what it's really telling me, I think, is that people are self-reporting that, yes, in fact, this is a huge issue. It's huge financially, it's huge physically, it's huge emotionally. This is not something that is easy. Many say it's the hardest job. It certainly was the hardest job I've ever had, watching my mom kind of go away slowly, bit by bit. And it's incredibly challenging. That's why we say we have an 800 number, you guys. Please call it at any time. It's 800-272-3900. You can vent. You can find lists of doctors. You can find that list of what questions to bring to a doctor's office. Plus, said before, you can call and say, my mom thinks that she's talking to her husband and her husband died 10 years ago. How the heck do I deal with this? So, it can be different advice. Plus, we have suggestions that for people who are working, right? So it's also for people who are working in the industry to get assistance. So that is important. We also have support groups. This is really critical because when you go to a support group, you're sitting there in a group, and a lot of them are online still. Some of them are meeting in person, but this is easy. You can slip into another room and go into a support group. You can listen to other people who've been through exactly what you've been through or kind of a little bit like it and get tips from peers. Oh, you tried that with your mom? Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Oh, that works for her. Oh, let me do that. Oh, look, that's a great idea. Go into their reality. Oh, okay. So that's the difference, I think. People don't realize that there are so many people around them all the time, right? If you polled your newsroom, half of them would have a connection to this disease, as you know. So it's really good to know that you're not alone, and please reach out. We have education classes. We're here. And we don't want you to say in a couple of years, gosh, I wish I reached out to you guys. I wish I knew you existed.
Yeah. So 7 out of 10 people want to know if their memory concerns are an issue, but we talked about this, only 4 out of 10 bring it up. Let's talk about, from your perspective, why early detection is so important. We just heard that there actually are some drugs coming down the pipeline, and what would be some other reasons you want to make sure you do have this information?
Absolutely. We are in a new era of treatment right now. There, for the first time in like 20 years, there are 2 medications that have been approved by the FDA that will change the course of the disease. They are not medications just for symptoms. They are Aduhelm and Leqembi. They are not covered by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. We are working on that as an advocacy organization in the hopes that they will change their mind and cover it, because when they cover it, typically other insurance companies cover it as well. It's like $26,000 a year or something. So that's the hope, is that we get that medication covered. It's FDA approved, and it's the only medication approved by the FDA that CMS does not cover. So we need to change that, absolutely change that narrative and change that. Also, it's that there are more in the pipeline. There are more drugs coming, more medications coming. And not only for that, there's so much research, Kara, going on, especially here in Connecticut. We are looking at, inflammation. We're looking at the gut microbiome, the gut brain connection. There are things looking at what is really the difference between a male brain and a female brain and how they process this disease, because there are differences. So I think getting diagnosed early is an opportunity for A, to have a new treatment potentially, B, to get involved in a clinical trial, which anyone can do to find out what's going on in research. Also, planning for your future and incorporating what we've talked about on the show before, lifestyle interventions that can reduce your risk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking right now, I'm looking at my mom and I'm noticing some things, which is why I always ask, what do we need to worry about? Is this something or is it not? She's 78, by the way. But also for ourselves, we do so many great interviews on CURES with integrative physicians, naturopathic doctors, who for a long time, it might be becoming more mainstream now, but have talked about that gut-brain connection, the importance of eliminating processed foods, the importance of adding in probiotics, and how we can really help our brain age more slowly. So that's a lot to unpack, but let's start with the prevention. What do we really know works? So hopefully we can motivate people to make some choices and not get that diagnosis.
Big fan of, and we've talked about this before, the Mediterranean diet. Really incorporating a lot of those good fats, a lot of the avocado and olive oil and green leafy vegetables, and really limiting those, as you mentioned, the ultra processed foods. Last year, it came out during our big conference, Alzheimer's Association International Conference, that if 20% of your diet is made up of processed foods, you're going to have a 30% increase in decline in your cognitive function. I mean, that's huge. That's all you need to do is reduce the amount of times you go get your fast food, right? Or don't do it at all.
Or
try to get some
box.
other stuff. Yeah, right.
Not just driving through. The doctor once said to me, quit when I was in college, don't eat anything that comes in a box, which is hard when you're not cooking. So, but there's simple ways to learn. But I think a lot of us just think, okay, I have a weight problem, so I don't care. That's not it. We're finding that this is really causing diseases like Alzheimer's, where you could really be hurting your cognition.
But reducing that and increasing exercise, we talk about that. You don't have to go become a marathon runner, you guys. Take a long walk, take walks. There was a big study that came out last year, talked about not only aerobic, but actually people who had MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment, which is kind of an early memory concern, some early memory concerns, but not enough to be diagnosed, but enough to be watched for sure. These folks with MCI did either aerobic or they did the stretching and yoga and that kind of thing and weight training, stayed the same. There was no decline in cognition after doing that for like a year. So those are important. That kind of exercise is important. We always talk about cognitive and social engagement, having those stimulating conversations, playing those word games, learning a new language. But if you can't learn a whole nother language, learn about a new topic, do some, get some information on something new that you're always interested in starting maybe to play an instrument that you always thought, maybe I played this in high school, but now I want to play the piano, or I want to learn to strum a guitar or something like that. Do something like that. Learn something new. It's really pretty important. And sleep. We can't talk enough about the importance of sleep. I'm sure you've done tons of stories on this.
Yeah.
You really need to sleep, because sleeping, actually, deep sleep, kind of gets rid of the toxins in your brain. It's like a clearinghouse. So that's critical as well.
Right, and even, they say what's good for your brain is good for your heart, vice versa. The American Heart Association finally added sleep this recently to one of the 8 things they want people to do to prevent heart disease, which I think a lot of us focus on now. And maybe there's a thought of like Alzheimer's is so down the road, or I don't even know what I do, but a lot of it is the same stuff. We're talking about that you're one person, your heart, your brain, and these things are gonna matter. Let's talk about if you're in the sandwich generation, like many that watch this podcast are. We've got about 3 minutes left together. So what would you do if you're worried about changes in your parents? Like I'm thinking, oh, is my mom normal or not normal, or what's normal, what's not? So what do you wish you knew, and what do you want to tell folks?
I wish that I would have looked at something online. We have classes called "What are the 10 signs of Alzheimer's? What are the 10 warning signs?" And you don't even have to go through a whole class. There's a list on our website, alz.org, and find out what those 10 signs are, and really what the difference between normal aging and something like a memory concern. That's what I wish I knew. I did call the Alzheimer's Association. Unbelievably, it was way before, and I was on television. I maybe had done a couple stories on them, but I knew they existed. So also spreading the word and knowing folks that they can call with any questions, even if they just get some sort of diagnosis. Watch again, difference in behavior. When it's different, my mom would stop making coffee because there are too many steps to making a pot of coffee. Instead, she made tea, because you dunk a tea bag in water and it's tea. But the coffee is lifting the thing and putting the water in and taking, measuring and this and that and the other thing, turning it on. So too many steps. It's a processing disease. So I really wish that I had known a little bit more, but I'm glad that I reached out early on in the process.
Yeah. Interesting. And we're just really on the forefront, neuroplasticity and what we can change and all of that. So again, I'm going to sum it up. Our doctor said there is no such thing as normal when it comes to losing your memory. That is not a normal phase of aging, even though many doctors might not tell you that. A trained specialist will say losing your memory at all is not normal. So we need to check that. And also you want us to just go to the Alzheimer's Association website, shout that out for folks real quick before we run out of time so we can make sure that they've got that resource.
Yep, alz.org is our website, and our 800 number, you can call at any time. That's 800-272-3900.
Kristen Casado, thank you so much. I know you always keep us informed about these new medications. That really could be a game changer if they get approved. And but there are still so many things that people can do. So I hope that after listening to this, you can share it with someone you love, and maybe it'll encourage everyone to not wait, not delay, and at least get some good information. So we appreciate your time, Kristen.
Thank you, Kara, so much.
Thank you. Yeah. 6-7 million people living with Alzheimer's in the United States, 80,000 here in Connecticut. So thank you for being with us on Kara's Cures. We explore the cutting edge of wellness. You can follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin. I like to share this content there. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.